afternoon. Welcome. Nice to have you both here.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here, camera, and people on the other side of the camera who will one day watch this. All thousands of you. So let's see. What I want to do today is I want to present a theory of counseling that is, I think, a terrific theory of counseling for private practice. It is an in-depth model for doing psychotherapy work with our clients. It is a longer-term therapy, but I think it offers a tremendous richness and is a wonderful complement to the sort of shorter-term therapy that you see in an agency setting. I think this is a modality for the longer-term therapy that's available in a private practice, and more of a relational therapy, more contactful therapy that's available in a private practice setting. The therapy typically goes, oops, this pen doesn't write. So we'll be more luck for the other ones. Okay. This therapy typically goes by the title Integrative Psychotherapy. And that's been what has been called, or IP for short, and that's been what has been called, by and large up to date. But it's a model that's fairly, well, that is becoming more common in Europe, and it has a smaller following here in North America. Okay? But integrative psychotherapy in the US has a different meaning typically. It's become mixed with kind of eclectic therapy. So I'm actually going to call it something a little bit different myself. I'm going to call it, interestingly enough, heart-centered counseling. And give it what I'm going to call its American name, or its North American name. Although they're welcome to use it in South America as well. I'll define the therapy. I'll define why those terms a little bit later. But it's a very elegant theory of counseling that incorporates a theory of personality, a theory of methods, as well as a theory of motivation. And today I'm going to give a bit of a breadth on the. I'm going to talk broadly about this, not in depth about any of this, and I'm going to present primarily the theory of personality and the theory of methods, and to a lesser extent, the theory of motivation, which I think I'll probably skip over today altogether. So let's start with the theory of personality. Okay, so let's do the theory of personality. Okay. And this is really about how we understand people and how we understand how people function, as well as what leads to what we could call perhaps badly labeled mental illness, but perhaps better labeled maladaptive coping style. Adaptive coping styles that really become maladaptive in healthy relationships. So, I'm going to express this model mostly pictorially. I like figures and images, so I'm going to do this mostly in pictures. Okay. So we're going to call this the self. Okay? This is the person. Okay? I'm going to present first a bit more of a Gestalt perspective, and then I'll map that into a transactional analysis perspective, because integrative psychotherapy or heart-centered counseling borrow most heavily from Gestalt therapy and transactional analysis, as Byrne originally conceived it in the 50s. And then also borrow secondarily from Rogers' humanistic therapy, as well as from cognitive behavioral and other models as well. So we've got the self here, and what happens here is, I'm going to call this the contact boundary. So everything that happens here is internal to the self, to the person. Okay? And then over here, you reach across the contact boundary, and now it becomes external, visible outside the person to the outside world. So this side is intrapsychic, happens within the self, and this side becomes interpersonal, happening in the relationship. Okay? And I'm going to put the other over here. Okay? Here's self and here's the other. And the other early on is probably the mother. Okay? And what happens is that early in life, all through life, we become aware of a certain level of internal contact. We become aware of our hunger. We become aware of our fatigue, our need for rest, as an example. Okay? We become aware of our need for contact. Okay? And we don't exist in isolation. We live in an interpersonal matrix. We're surrounded by people around us. And I think that at this point in the field of psychotherapy, we have been wise enough and thoughtful enough to recognize that the primary human motivation is really the longing for a relationship, okay? The longing for contact. And what happens is, as we make internal contact, so we can think of it early in life to start, as the infant makes internal contact, okay, he or she reaches out across the contact boundary in the hope that the need, the feeling will be met in an attuned way. Okay? And if all goes well, so this may be I'm going to focus here on, although they're physiological as well, there are relational needs, feelings. Okay? Physiological needs are also here. Physiological, P-S-Y, spell
P-H-Y.
P-H-Y, keep spelling.
S-I-O.
S-I-O.
Go ahead, take it.
He's got it from there.
C-A-L. Okay, just wanted to make sure. With the world watching, I got to spell correctly. So we may reach out with different needs or even with our feelings. Okay? And what we're hoping for when we reach out is we are hoping for an attuned response that satisfies that need. So the infant cries out to the mother with her hungry cry, and the mother responds by bringing her breast to the infant. The infant is fed, the need gets met, okay? And we have what Fritz Perls called the completion of a primary gestalt. Okay? And so this would come back, ideally would be an attuned response. CE or SE in response?
S.
Yes. All right. It's a spelling lesson as well.
I know.
Yes. We come back with an attuned response. And this whole piece here is what we can call a primary gestalt. Okay? This is really good when this happens. Okay? Because what it says to the infant is it's okay to reach out in the world with your needs, with your feelings. If you reach out in the world with your needs and feelings, Mom's going to show up. She's going to be there. So you can go ahead and make contact with yourself. Whatever comes to the figure, you can reach out in the world for. The world is a friendly, welcoming place. It will meet your need, and you will feel a sense of satisfaction. You can then move on to your next need, perhaps your need to rest. Cry out for Mom to hold you, Mom holds you, and now you can rest. And you move in this constant movement between internal contact, external contact, and what we have then is we have the infant's ability to be spontaneous, natural, to not have to inhibit him or herself, and to feel that they are transacting in a world where relationships are safe and are able to attend to the infant's needs. All right. I was just thinking as I drank. Now the whole world's going to know I gulp when I drink.
The secret is out.
We can edit this.
You can edit that out. Okay, good. Thanks. Now I want to talk about what attuned responses are. I want to talk about relational needs, and I want to talk about feelings, and what the attuned response is to them. Okay. So save red for later. So from a feeling standpoint, there are 5 primary emotions that I'm going to list here. Okay, there is, and there are subcategories for each. But I'm going to call one excitement, okay, which can include happiness and so on. I'm going to call one sad, which can include hurt and so on. I'm going to call one angry, which can include frustration and so on. I'm going to call the other one fear, or let me say scared. And I'm going to call the last one anxious. I did not create these words, in case you were wondering. They've already existed for a little while now. I'll take credit though.
We'll give it to you.
All right. So, if the child reaches out across the contact boundary with these feelings, feelings are a relational request for a caring, attuned response. So if the child reaches out, we'll start with sadness. Okay? The attuned response is compassion. Okay? Words of compassion and acts of compassion. That if I reach out to you in my sadness, my hope is that you'll offer me a place of compassion where I'll feel cared for. And if I need an act of compassion from you, then hopefully you'll be available to provide that for me. The attuned response to anger, okay, I'm going to write it first, is serious taking, that you take me seriously in what I'm saying, and that you offer correction, words of correction and acts of correction, okay? So that I see from you that you take my anger seriously and that you're willing to engage with me in some dialogue around correction. The attuned response to being scared or anxious is reassurance. That you meet my scared and anxious with the reassurance that you are going to be there for me. Hey, I've got you. You're not alone in this. We'll get through this together. I'm right here with you. I've got you. And we'll find a way to do things that are reassuring for you together. Okay? And the attuned response to excitement is to meet that excitement with your own excitement, with a sense of vitality and aliveness. Okay? That I get excited and you get excited with me, and we're in this together. Okay? And when these feelings are met in these ways, then this child has the ability, has the freedom to express his or her feelings and say, hey, there's a world out there that's going to meet me where I'm at and attend to me in a caring way. Okay? From a relational needs standpoint, Richard Erskine, who is the founder of Integrative Psychotherapy, I'll write his name down, it's the least I can do. Richard Erskine has defined 8 basic relational needs. Okay? And they are these. He has, let's see if I can remember them all off the top of my head. I should be able to. Let's see, where do we start? The need for security. The need for validation. What I'm going to call the need to be similar to. That I need to know that you're like me, okay, and that we share experiences together. The need to have somebody to look up to. there's somebody I can look up to, who I can learn from, who I can admire, who can be a role model for me, so that I can learn, that I can grow. The need for self-definition. There's room for me to express who I am in relationship. This is me. I matter. My voice counts. The need to make an impact. That you are impacted by me, and that I sense you being impacted by me. The need to have the other initiate. That I'm not always the one reaching out to you. That I'm not the guy always calling you. That you're going to call me back. That you want me. That you're going to initiate with me. And then finally, the need to express love. And I'll talk a little bit more about each of these and what the attuned response is to each of these. Okay? The need to feel secure is really met through what Rogers calls unconditional positive regard. Positive regard. Okay. It's feeling from you that I'm okay with you, that I'm enough for you, that I don't need to be more than I am, that it's safe for me to be who I am, and that's enough. Okay. The need for validation is largely met through affective attunement. That when you attune to my feelings, I feel validated in who I am. The need to feel similar to is met in part through a certain level of self-disclosure. That we relate to each other in a way that you feel our connection. That we've had a shared experience, that we've had similar experience. That you're like me and I'm like you, and we're in this world together. Okay? So it can be met in a therapeutic setting through the appropriate use of self-disclosure. Okay? The need to have somebody to look up to it is met in part through I'm going to say it this way. This is where I think having a strong set of ethical boundaries becomes important. It's met through a certain level of being being there with people in a way that says, I'm going to be with you and have healthy boundaries, and engage with you in a way that I'm reliable and consistent in how I transact with you. And you can count on me as somebody who can be there for you in a consistent, steady way. That's engaging with you. Okay? And I really think from a therapeutic setting, it's okay if our clients look up to us. It's even okay if our clients look up to us and want to adapt to us for a time. It's okay if there's a level of dependence in that way, because I'd much rather you adapt to me than keep adapting to the crazy family you might have grown up in. That's a much healthier adaptation as a stepping stone towards your own building your own sense of self. The need for self-definition comes from, in a therapeutic setting, really allowing our clients the room to tell us about who they are instead of us telling them about who they are. To really, if they say, no, that's not right, oh, well, then tell me what is. Okay? Then tell me about you. Help me understand. Okay? So the need for self-definition is met through really just listening to who our clients tell us they are. Okay? We all need to make an impact. I need to know that I impact you in who I am. Okay? And so, in a therapeutic setting, that's met by being impacted by. Okay? As I told one of my clients yesterday, I'm aware when I hear that story of my own sadness for you. and in my own anger towards your father, out of my desire to protect you from him. Because I feel very protective of you right now. I was quite impacted by what you shared. Okay? The need to have the other initiate comes from the therapist sometimes initiating. I don't think any of us want a therapist who's just going to sit back and listen to us and not get involved with us and at times initiate. It can also mean sometimes, if appropriate, to give our clients a call if they're really suffering or struggling and say, hey, I'm here. I just wanted to call and check in and see how you are. Right. Now, the last one I wrote is the need to express love. Okay? Because all these are ways in which we receive love. Okay? By offering a sense of security, a sense of validation, a sense of I'm in this with you, a sense of I will be consistent with you and you can trust that you can look up to me and I'll be with you in a steady way. Right? A need for self-definition. I want to make sure I recorded all this. I may have forgotten to press the button. Yep, it's recording. Good. Just got this fear all of a sudden I didn't press the button and it wasn't recording. Making room for our clients to define who they are, being impacted by, initiating. All these are ways in which we allow our clients to receive our care, to receive love. It's also important for our clients to be able to express love. Often clients do that in a therapeutic setting by expressing gratitude. And it's really important that we be able to receive that gratitude graciously. You're most welcome for the help. I'm really glad I could be here for you in this way. And that we don't, in our own countertransference, diminish that. Oh, there's nothing to be thankful for. Well, you don't have to thank me. To really take it in graciously. Okay? And so, in a therapeutic setting, the need to express love is often met by our ability to receive gratitude graciously. Okay? And so this is how we form a healthy sense of self. Okay? We reach out, we make internal contact with ourselves, we reach out into the world with our physiological needs, our relational needs, our feelings. We get an attuned response to that. We say, boy, that world is a wonderful place to be in. I can't wait to share my next experience in this world. And there's a naturalness and a spontaneity that we can share all of who we are and bring whatever comes to the foreground out into the world and express a naturalness. Okay? In the language of transactional analysis, okay, in the language of transactional analysis, this part of it really forms the adult self. Okay, the adult in us is the part of ourselves that is free to come from who we are and leverage both our learned experiences from other people as well as our learned experiences in childhood, bring all of who we are very naturally and fully into relationship. Okay? But the reality is, this isn't always what happens. The dilemma arises for any individual in what happens when we don't get the attuned response. When this isn't there. When that doesn't happen. Okay? And there are varying degrees in which that doesn't happen. Okay? That cannot happen in these ways, in order of increasing severity. Okay? The gentlest way in which that can happen is simply just relational failure. I need mom or dad to show up for the big game, and they're sick, and they just can't go. There's a pressing issue with work that mom has to go and attend to and can't be there for me for what I might need that evening at that time. Okay? In a more severe way, there may be neglect, emotional neglect, down to physical neglect. And more severe yet, there may be abuse, ranging from emotional and verbal abuse all the way down to physical and sexual abuse. Okay? All these ways in which we don't get an attuned response mean that we have to somehow deal with the fact that when I put myself out there, I don't get back what I need. Right? And it's very painful to reach out in the world over and over again with, say, our sadness, and find there's nobody there for us. In fact, it's too painful to continue long term. So what we do is we have to find some way to internally compensate for the failure here. Okay? Now, there are different ways to compensate, and different ways in which we can compensate. Okay, let's take it from the place of a young infant as a starting point. Okay, to the young child who is hungry, for example. Okay, and they start out. They get in touch with their hunger. They reach out across the contact boundary for hunger, usually with their sad cry of some sort. Okay, they start over here. They try to reach out with their sad cry. I'll actually put this in green, okay, just to clarify it. So in green, they're still trying to reach out this way. So they reach out first with the sad cry, hoping that mom will show up. Okay? Mom doesn't show up. Okay? The sad cry says, hey, I'm hungry. Come on over. Bring that wonderful breast. I could really use with a wonderful bottle. I could really use that food right now. Okay? If that doesn't work, they usually still stay in relationship and try their angry cry. Okay? Which now starts to demand some serious taking and some correction. Yo, mama! Bring that over here. Come on, I'm hungry. Where are you? Now, if mom still doesn't show up, okay, it's too painful to tolerate this failure. Now the child starts to compensate internally. Okay? Now the screams start to change. They move toward a raging scream. Okay? But the raging scream is no longer an attempt to reach out for mom to be there. The child at this point has given up on mom's ability to show up and is now internally raging, because what the rage does for a child is it increases their blood sugar level and actually is a way to start to regulate their own hunger in the absence of a mother to come to do that. And if nobody still comes, then the child moves finally into despair. A crying onto themselves that is soothing, that is regulating. Because this sort of, the kind of cry a child does here is self-soothing. And so now the child, okay, pre-verbally, okay, is doing two things. Okay? This forms, usually pre-verbally, okay, in the form of, you now have physiological, I'm going to look over here to say the spell, you now have physiological. So it's sort of physiologically. These are physiological mechanisms as well as affectively. Okay. As well as relationally. Okay. So that what happens, and And this is where the whole attachment literature comes in, okay? You end up with, what you end up here are attachment patterns. So the child starts to have coping mechanisms that they start to rely on to soothe themselves physiologically, emotionally, and through relational styles, well before they even form words. Okay? And what happens, okay. Now, these are what Fritz Perls called secondary gestalts. Secondary gestalts. Okay? Now, as the child grows and gains cognitive skill and verbal skill, these start to become stored in cognition as belief systems. So this becomes, there must be something wrong with me. Even my own mom won't come and be with me. Gee, if only I get it right enough, then maybe mom will love me. Okay. And they also get stored behaviorally. Right? Now, there's three different ways I want to go, and I can't go all ways at one time. So let me do two. Let me try to do it slowly. Okay, so far. Okay. Is it clear enough? Is there anything that's unclear before I keep going that needs clarification? Okay. So, along with the formation of the secondary gestalt, I can't reach out into the world with what I feel. Okay? Two things. So we form a way to compensate for it, but we also do two other things to compensate. One is, I'm going to take this word out here because it's in my way. One is we repress the relational need and the feeling. We push it down here. We push it inside ourselves. I can't reach out for the sadness. I'm going to compensate in some way, and I'm going to repress that feeling. Because there's no room for it. It's too painful to leave it hanging. The other thing we do is we internalize the other. So I'm going to actually move where I put that. We internalize the other. So that we bring the mother or the other inside ourselves. So every time I am inclined to express my sadness to my mother, I remember that if I express my sadness to my mom, she gets very anxious, and in her anxiety, perhaps gets upset with me. She says, "You've got nothing to be sad about. Don't be sad about that." Well, I don't want to keep doing that. It's too painful to keep getting mom to do that. So I pull that mom in my head, and when I start to get sad, I say to myself, exactly that. "You got nothing to be sad about. There's no reason to do that." Okay? And we internalize the critical parts of our parents so that we don't have to confront externally the pain of what would happen if we reached out for the real parent. Okay? And this is called introjection. All right. Now, in the language of transactional analysis, okay, there's two ways in which we can describe this, okay? Now, but before I do, I should say one more thing. So what happens to the child who has to adapt to the failure of the parent to be there? And we all have to adapt in some ways to do it, okay? The child has to find some internal way to compensate, okay? through some kind of coping mechanism internally, and they repress the original needs and feelings because they're too painful to experience, and they pull in that critical part of the parent and do it to them and critique themselves to avoid mom doing it, dad doing it to them. Okay? Now, what starts to happen is what Freud called the transference of everyday life. Okay? You can call it projection, and you can call it just transference. What happens is, as the child goes through life, okay, and let's say every time the kid got sad, mom says, hey, you got nothing to be sad about. You got a roof over your head. You got food on your plate, or dad says that. Okay? The kid knows, gee, it's not okay to express my sadness. It's not safe. Okay? So, kid's in a situation with somebody else, okay, and whatever the circumstance starts to feel sad, okay, they don't reach out this way to the other person with their sadness because they've already come to believe, hey, mom won't be there. As soon as they start to feel their sadness, their anxiety comes up, that person won't be there, I better not go this way, and they go back to their coping style. They push down the feeling, and they go back to coping style. So that these secondary gestalts, these coping styles, every time the child or the adult is in a situation where they fear that they're going to get, it starts to feel like what it might have felt like with mom, they go back to the coping style. Okay, so this becomes a patterned way in which they start to respond throughout their life. Okay? So if my mother used to watch me, for example, and look at me to see whether I was meeting her expectations or not, to make sure I was behaving properly. And now, as an adult, I go to a party where there's lots of people who probably aren't watching me, but nonetheless I fear perhaps are watching me. I become anxious. Uh-oh, they're probably all watching me. And I go back to my coping style of, gee, I better get it right to make sure they're okay with me. So instead of just being who I am with them, I'm going to try to get it right for them the way I tried to get it right for mom when she was watching me. Okay? So Eric Berne called this life script. Okay? That we have an unconscious set. We have a set of unconscious coping patterns. We have a set of physiological survival reactions, of implicit conclusions, of explicit decisions, of introjects that together inhibit our spontaneity and naturalness in relationship. That we have a story we tell ourselves of, this is how life works. This is how relationships work. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And we replay that life script throughout our lifespan unless we learn how to do it differently. Okay? And so people are always telling the story of what happened to them non-verbally through how they're responding. Okay. From Eric Berne's ego state model, he did this. He broke the person down into for a minute. He broke the self down into three parts. He said there's the adult part, which is the part that can still be spontaneous and natural because he or she had complete gestalts, the needs met around this. There is the child ego state, okay? The archaeopsyche, the child ego state. Okay? And the child ego state represents the collection of remembered frozen ways of being that we revert back to when we're under pressure or anxiety. Okay? So some of these form when we were very young, some of these form when we're older. So there are different child ego states, okay, which represent the collection of adaptive coping styles. People often feel very young when they start to respond in these ways. Then there's the parent ego state, which is the collection of all the introjects that we've swallowed whole, all the parts of our critical parents that we pulled inside of ourselves, so that we do to ourselves what our mother would have, or our father, or the other would have done to us, and beat him to the punch, so that we don't suffer the humiliation of their anger or disappointment, or whatever it might be with us. And so, what you have now is a framework for understanding psychopathology, a framework for understanding all the illnesses, not all, but many of the illnesses in the DSM. Okay? That these adaptive coping styles lead to different ailments. So that, for example, if you have to keep inside your sadness, over and over and over again. You push your sadness down, you push your sadness down, you push your sadness down, and you don't trust you can put your feelings into a relationship because they ain't going to be there for you. Over time, that buildup leads to depression, for example. If nobody's there for you in the world, and you have to figure out how to survive in this world all by yourself, and how to take care of everything all by yourself all the time, there's a recipe for anxiety. That you can look at most ailments that you find in the DSM, almost DSM-5, I guess it's out. Don't tell anybody you don't have a copy yet. But I will soon. And you can usually look in an in-depth therapy at how the person is compensated for the failure in relationship, because most ailments can be cured by real quality contact and relationship. Right? That if I can reach out into the world with how I feel, then I can move through most trauma, most depression, most anxiety. If I can share that vulnerability again with the world. So now we're going to get to, and I'm kind of already talking a little bit about the theory of methods. Okay? So let's do a theory of methods here. And again, I'm kind of giving you breadth, not depth. So this is a little bit of everything touching on the surface. We could go more depth about all of this, but we won't right now. Okay. So, do you need me to pause here? Do you need a break before we go on? You want a couple minutes right now?
Sure.
I'm okay, but we can break.
Should we do that? And for
Sure.
you too?
Yeah, I'm happy either way. I can pause it right now. We can take a break. We can pick back up. What do you guys
A
like?
quick pause would be great.
Let's do that.